Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, there's code out in the wild that can attack critical infrastructure equipment. And did you notice that some trusted websites were hacked this week and then turned against their own visitors? We'll give you all the details on that. Plus, after we talk about all that stuff, it's our Building the Ultimate Home Router segment, and we'll tell you how you can build a home router that's often more capable than many enterprise systems for free and just a couple of button clicks. All that and more on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 23, and it was shot on September 15th, 2011, for release on September 16th, a Friday, 2011. My name is Chris, and joining me on the Skype line for all 23 weeks is Alan. Hey there, Alan. Welcome back.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, everybody. How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good.
We have a huge show, Alan, and
yes,
we're going to have to get into it. Now, this week we're kicking off a series of chats about building home servers, and we're really going to try to take a multi-episode arced approach at this. We kind of have ideas to spread out, and we're going to attack them at sort of each different level in each different episode. So we have that coming up. We also have a bunch of interesting news we're going to cover, like we do in every TechSNAP, and we have a massive roundup powered by primarily our Reddit page. So I want to say thanks to everyone over at our Reddit page at links.techsnap.tv. It is a happening place, Alan. With
and then we also have a war story.
Oh, we do have a war story. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Alan has a war story he's going to share. It's been a little while, and so it seemed like perfect time to have a war story again. And for those of you who are new to the show, Alan and I both have an extensive background in IT, and if you combine our experience, we're probably over 30 years of computer background, IT experience in all different forms. And Alan's also been a professor and has taught basic networking and all these kinds of things, all the way from the ground up. And so we've collected a lot of stories over the years, so it's fun to share them on occasion here on TechSNAP. So we got one of those coming up. But before we go, I just want to do a funny little mention, because this week the whole world's been talking about Windows 8. And one of the things that hit our Reddit page over at links.techsnap.tv was the funny new Windows 8 blue screen of death. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't seen it.
Okay, so check this out. It is just a big smiley face in their new font that they call the Metro font. And it says, "Your PC ran into a problem that it couldn't handle, and now it needs to restart. It'll restart in 1 second." And it's...
That's less useful than a stop screen that has an error code that you can look up and actually figure out what the hell was going on.
Oh, I totally agree. And it's like, also, it totally puts the blame on the PC. It's not like, Windows didn't do this. It is, though, very pleasant.
Oh, your hardware that, was working fine is all of a sudden...
It's pleasant, though. I mean, it's more user-friendly. So that's good, I guess. But that
would it kill them to leave the stop code in there, though?
They might include it. There is a space in the image where I think they could insert it. Like if you look, it gives just the stop code. It gives only the stop code. System service.
You really need, I guess, but
I guess, yeah. But anyways, so thanks to the guys that submitted that in the TechSNAP Reddit. All right, Alan. Now we have just a massive amount of stuff to get to, so let's jump right into it. Okay, let's talk about our first story. This is an Italian hacker who published 10 plus zero-day exploits for the machinery that runs like critical infrastructure. Like one of the first times we heard about this was with the centrifuges in Iran, and remember Stuxnet, the stuff that runs the core stuff.
Stuxnet was based on 4 zero-day exploits to take over the Siemens SCADA system that ran the centrifuges. Now, this hacker has come up with 10 plus different exploits for a series of different SCADA systems.
Wow.
And published them, including proof of concept on how to implement the exploit.
Now, so he didn't just say, here's the code. He said, here's an example using the code.
Yeah, so here's what the problem is, and here's an example of how you would take advantage of that. Which is how most attacks, like how, exploits are published.
It makes the thing, though, is like, why do they do this, right? Because these very sophisticated hackers go in here and figure out really the nuts and bolts of this stuff, and then they just kind of throw it out there, and then like the jackals can get their hands on it who aren't really the experts.
Most times what the people will do was they'll tell the manufacturer of the system that's vulnerable and give them a certain amount of time to make a patch and apply it before they publish their research.
Right.
But if they hold on forever waiting for the manufacturer to publish a fix, the manufacturers sometimes just don't. Or in the case of like Sony, if you remember, Sony was told long before they were hacked that their system needed to be fixed because it was, horrible. But there was no easy way to figure out which person you need to contact.
Well, the other question I have is, why not just bypass a certain level of risk with this? We're talking equipment that runs infrastructure stuff that, you know, if it goes out, if it goes offline, if it could affect entire populations. Why connect that to the internet? Why have that on an IP network?
Well, some of them are not necessarily on the internet.
They just,
they're on intranets, but if you can break in and get into the intranet, right?
Yeah, if you can get on the LAN. And I guess they do that for management purposes, I suppose, right?
Right, and like a lot of this stuff is so that it can be monitored remotely and so on.
Right. So, I guess, do we have any idea of what kind of equipment's targeted and things like that?
Well, SCADA systems are used for all kinds of things, including like water and sewage treatment, dams and power plants, manufacturing automation, all kinds of stuff. One example of this was in January of 2000 in Australia. They installed a new SCADA system, and after a couple of weeks, they started noticing it acting very strangely, and they thought it was a bug in the system. But eventually, through the logs, they were able to figure out that it was somebody remotely controlling it. And what they managed to do was pump a bunch of sewage by opening valves that weren't supposed to open, and flood a nearby park and contaminate an open surface drainage ditch that went out into the tidal basin.
That must have stunk so bad.
Yeah.
Yuck. And that was in 2000?
Yeah, so that was a while ago, but hopefully they've learned a bit from there. But it seems that the Italian hacker that came up with these new exploits he's tried to contact the manufacturers, but mostly it's like if you're trying to contact some big company and you're just some random guy off the internet, how do you do that? You know, there's not just an email address for I've hacked your software and you need to know about it.
I've run into it before, too, where I've run into issues where I've had concerns, and I've been like, you know, I should probably contact this company and let them know I'm concerned about this because this doesn't seem right from an implementation standpoint. And it's just, you get lost. You know, the best you can find is like some sort of help email or something like that, and it's just, I don't know.
Well, and, you know, in the companies that only make these systems, they deal directly with the people, or they don't even. Like, some of these companies that build these systems, they don't ever sell them to anybody. They get sold through an intermediary that actually installs them and builds the whole system around the hardware.
Right.
And so they don't ever have any direct contact with the public.
Well, and the other issue to consider, too, is the people that discover these vulnerabilities. It is quite literally easier for them to sell them on the black market online, to go up somewhere and say, here's a little proof of concept. If you want me to customize this for you to make your particular thing you need done, we can work up a business arrangement. And it's easier to get that done than it is in a lot of cases to notify these companies about their own vulnerabilities. And until they can fix that, it's like music piracy. Music piracy was never, ever, ever going to be curbed at all until iTunes came along and made it one-click button to purchase. And then Amazon took off and everybody took off. And now music piracy isn't as rampant. But until it became easier to not break the law than it was to break the law, people break the law. It's like, when people, it's the same thing as not putting some of your shows on HD. It's easier for me to download them in HD than it is to get the cable service. You know what I'm saying? You got to make following the rules easier, and a system and a process people can work through. And you got to make it something that's well known, because all kinds of different people are discovering stuff all the time. It's not just like one group of people. It's people all over the net. Should we move on to our next story?
Yeah.
All right, so this next story is when hackers turn on one of their own. Well, kind of. uTorrent's rather legit these days, but they were actually knocked offline for a few hours from an attack recently, right? Or something happened.
So on or before Tuesday, September 13th, the official uTorrent.com website was compromised, and for a few hours, what the attackers managed to do was replace the files you download with scareware, which is a fake antivirus program that then tries to charge you money.
Oh, so like if you go get uTorrent, you get crapware instead?
Yeah, so if you went to the official uTorrent website and tried to download it, you got crapware instead. And once you installed it, it would say, your system is infected with a bunch of malware. You need to pay us to remove it.
Oh, like the hostage stuff. I hate that.
Yeah.
I kid you not, I got called into a virus infection last week or so. I posted an image of it up on Google+. It got a ton of shares. I came up to a machine that had a virus infection. I got, my machine got junk. I walked up to it, and it said, your machine has to shut down because it contains too many secrets, and it exceeds the limit of secrets put in place by the National Secrecy Agency or something like that. Crazy. And then there was an option to buy protection and all kinds of stuff where they try to get users who don't know any better. And the thing is, they look good, too. They're flashy. So, yeah, that is not
I remember the ones
anymore.
that... early on in XP, before like Service Pack 2, they had the ones that would look like the Windows Update logo and stuff. And they'd try everything to look like the legit Windows stuff.
Yeah. I'm going to see if the chat room can find that Google Plus post for me so that way I can put it in the show notes, because it was pretty funny and I got a nice snap of it. Anyways.
So yeah, if you downloaded uTorrent between 1220 and 1410 British Standard Time on the 13th, you likely already know that you got malware instead of uTorrent.
Yeah, people probably got crap popping up right away when that happened, right?
Yep.
Oh, that sucks.
So in this case, the attack was fairly obvious because they just replaced uTorrent with the crapware.
Right.
If they had been sneakier, they would have attached the crapware to uTorrent. So you downloaded uTorrent, you got uTorrent, you ran it, and secretly in the background, when you didn't notice, it was starting to install stuff.
It always seems like to me that somebody could take a torrent binary and replace it to almost act like a bot for them. So when people are running to do downloads, you could have it like connect to an IRC server and start taking instructions, because a lot of people leave their torrent clients running for hours, and it's not unusual for a torrent client to take a lot of bandwidth and CPU. So it's a perfect place to slip something like that in there.
Yeah, and they're usually, either through UPnP or manually, users forward the ports for them, so they punch through the firewall. Right?
Yeah.
That's one of the, your regular firewall that doesn't allow anybody from the outside to connect in would normally stop most basic Trojans, except for ones that have a reverse connection path. But if you're attaching to something that's on the allowed list, right? Even like most software firewalls have like allow or deny per application. So then if you're allowing uTorrent because you installed uTorrent and you want it to be allowed, but the version of uTorrent you have is infected such that it's doing something else in addition, then you end up with this problem.
Wow. Well, and really, in most cases, it's like people going after this. Like they call it the syntax, where when you think somebody's smoking or something like that, you can ding them a little extra because they're doing something that's a sin or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
This is kind of like going after the people who are already kind of in the shady stuff. So you almost, depending on what you're downloading, you might think it's what you torrented, right? And you might not realize that it was uTorrent itself.
Exactly.
And so you'd probably just assume you just download something with crap on it. And so you're not even going to remove the infected uTorrent. So the number one thing to do is watch TechSNAP. That seems like the solution to that one.
Well, and the other thing is that, this could have got, if they had noticed right away, this could have gotten much worse if like the auto update feature on uTorrent was triggered and, everybody that had a copy of uTorrent went and downloaded the infected version.
Right.
Especially if that infected version was uTorrent with a virus attached rather than just replaced with the virus.
That would be the money right there. That would be the money shot, because that would really
basically silently infect a huge number of PCs through the auto update function. But, this is always the nightmare security situation, is that when a legitimate trusted site is compromised and starts distributing harmful content.
Well, that's why you have a lot of people doing package signing now, right? To kind of try to avoid that?
Yeah. But, we've seen that with the DigiNotar hack, the guy managed to make a copy of Calculator as if it was signed by Google.
Yeah, in that case.
And so in this case, if they had a fake certificate, code signing certificate for uTorrent, they could have signed the virus and it would look legit.
There's at that point there's nothing to make the system alert to any otherwise if you can do that.
Yep.
But that's massive, And did you see too that the Dutch government now has taken over DigiNotar?
Yes.
Yeah, so they're stepping in.
Talk a little bit about that, yeah.
Did we mention the Dutch government had taken over? Oh, okay.
I think so, yeah.
All right. Anything else on this one?
The second story. Mostly just that, not the next story, but I think the one after that, we talk more about trusted sites distributing harmful content.
Oh, okay. Well, you want to talk a little bit about something that really is the nightmare scenario in tech? This one, you mentioned it's a trusted software shipping with something attached to it, but what about this one? What about being able to infect a system at the chip level? Is this for real, Alan? BIOS rootkits?
Yep. So basically, it's a virus that can infect pretty much any PC that has an award branded BIOS.
Oh, really?
Which is a very popular brand. It's the one used by Asus. It's what every computer I own.
Yeah.
Which is a lot of computers.
The computer you're calling in on right now is got an award BIOS, yeah.
Yep, and the one beside it, and the one
No, I mean the one my computer that you're on right now has
yep.
an award BIOS, and the computer to my left has
Yep.
it. Yeah. So, oh crap.
There are only about 3 or 4 major BIOS brands, and Award I think has the lion's share of the market share.
So I mean, what are we talking about here? Like they make an exploit of the flashing mechanism, because I know
Basically, yeah. What it does is it uses it's a Windows virus, and what it does is it takes a copy of your BIOS and saves it to a file on your hard drive, which is what any flashing utility can do, right? You back up your old BIOS before you flash the new one. Then it uses a tool to modify the copy of your BIOS to include an ISA ROM that will rewrite the master boot record. So to avoid bricking your machine, they start with your copy of your BIOS and then
clever.
just attach a bit of virus to it.
That is really clever.
And then reflash your system with the infected BIOS.
Because the BIOS is so different, it's so specifically tuned to the hardware
Each
and architecture.
individual motherboard, basically.
So you completely bypass that issue, because you can't have a generic BIOS image in this scenario.
Exactly. So it takes a copy of your BIOS, rewrites it with the virus, and then flashes it over top.
It makes that copy while running in Windows.
Yes. Now, see, BIOSes never used to be able to be changed in Windows.
No, and see, as soon as you started being able to do that, I thought this was going to happen. I always thought this would happen.
If you go all the way back to when they first invented the idea of this, you actually had to move a jumper.
Yes.
To allow you to write to the BIOS.
And it's appropriate, because when you're dealing with a chip that can, if you destroy this chip, it makes your $2,000 computer completely...
Well, most motherboards now have dual BIOSes, one read only and one read write.
That's true. But for mainly the nicer motherboards, the people for overclock and stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess, what do you get by rootkitting a BIOS? Do you get access to the operating system?
In this case, what it does is it allows it to reinfect the hard drive with a master boot record virus every time the computer starts.
So it injects it from the BIOS.
Yeah. So when the computer first turns on, the BIOS starts. The BIOS infects the hard drive with a master boot record virus. Then, when the computer boots, the master boot record virus infects winlogon.exe with a Windows rootkit. Then, when Windows starts, the rootkit downloads a Trojan.
And that rootkit could download any Trojan de jour, any one that the author wants to download this month. Maybe it's a Bitcoin miner, maybe it's a spam machine.
Yeah. And then they take over the machine.
And the chat room likes that one. The chat room really thinks that's great.
And the rootkit also prevents any other programs from overwriting the master boot record. So it stops most regular, like in Windows virus scanners from being able to fix it.
Now, so I got 2 points on this. Number one is this is a major issue with rootkits, especially in Windows XP. A rootkit can be completely oblivious. The operating system can be totally and completely oblivious to a rootkit. And since the way things are architectured now in NT, the antivirus system has to work through what Windows can see. And so if Windows can't see it, in a lot of cases, the antivirus can't see it.
Right. Like the biggest thing of rootkits is what they do is make it so certain files don't appear.
Yeah.
So nothing in the operating system can see that file.
Now, the point, though, that has been recently being debated in the U.S. government is if we need to be concerned about, well, I guess they said Asian manufacturers, but I don't know, about Asian manufacturers injecting code into chips that are being deployed into U.S. intelligence systems. So I guess they've been concerned that there's been viruses found inside chips before.
Well, we've seen viruses come on blank hard drives before as well.
So this actually is a legitimate scenario where a manufacturer could preload these BIOSes with this virus, and then it doesn't matter if you format your hard drive or whatever, it always re-injects you with this Trojan and this rootkit. And,
the virus could be programmed so that the BIOS only deploys the infection, a year after it was manufactured.
Whoa.
Right?
Whoa.
So you deploy the machine, start using them, and everything's okay. But a year later, zap, master boot record virus.
And you would have no idea. You would, and I mean,
it would be it'd be stealthier that way than having it out of the box have these problems.
And of course,
because I have a link to it somewhere, I think, but a bunch of people in the U.S. were just arrested for selling fake Cisco gear.
Oh, really?
In Washington D.C., like around Virginia and so on.
No kidding.
So they were selling knockoff Cisco gear. Now, if the main concern there was if that gear, because it was being sold in like Virginia, got into the government somehow, that's fake Cisco gear with possibly Chinese viruses on the chips or whatever that would allow them to intercept the communications.
You know what we need is some way to, I guess, verify that the BIOS is clean. Like, I guess maybe could they build them some sort of like MD5 hash check, and when the system boots, the BIOS does like a check on itself or something?
That's possible. Yeah, code signing for BIOSes.
Because this completely throws out the old paradigm of if you're really infected, the only way you know you're going to be 100% clean is format that hard drive. Because, okay, bring it. It's going to say the only thing you can really do is run Linux.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, with this virus, it's going to, even if you manage to remove the rootkit and remove the master boot record virus, when you reboot, it's going to reinstall the master boot record, and that's going to reinstall the rootkit.
Yeah. And
so it makes it very persistent. It's very hard to remove it. You'd have to basically boot off some kind of live CD and reflash your BIOS with a known good one, and then disinfect your master boot record and remove the rootkit. And
this reminds me a lot of what we covered in regards to the MacBook and the battery firmwares, that you could input code in the battery firmware to mess up.
Right. So imagine this whole chain, right? You have the BIOS infecting the boot record installing a rootkit, and the rootkit installing a Trojan, but the battery reinfects the BIOS if you reflash the BIOS.
You just get this whole system totally jacked up, and then just, this is like Mission Impossible stuff. Where you get you break into the lab and you infect their computer.
In depth instead of defense in depth.
Totally. Any other thoughts on this one before we move on?
Symantec has a really good write-up on breaking down what actually happens, and they have flowcharts showing how it works.
And, of course, link to that is in the show notes. Links to pretty much everything we talked about.
With this happening, we might eventually see the jumper for read-only BIOSes come back.
That also seems like the way to go. You know what I mean? And
if they're worried about usability and stuff, maybe make it default to allow writes for, but Joe Idiot shouldn't be upgrading his BIOS anyway.
Or even a soft option to put it only to read-only mode or something, or a password, or require a password update or something.
Makes sense. Or maybe they should have, if you have a BIOS password, then you can't overwrite the BIOS. But most people flash the BIOS or erase it on purpose to get rid of the password in the BIOS.
Yeah, that's true, and that's not impossible to get around.
With the Mac batteries, they did have a password, but the thing was Apple used the same password on every battery. And so once the guy managed to brute force that password, or actually he reverse engineered it from Apple's update. It's
got to be a user-controlled process, right? It's not scalable for the manufacturer to set a password. That's just not really.
Hardware is the only real answer.
Yeah.
If you want to flash the BIOS, taking the side off the case isn't that big of a challenge.
No, if you're down working at that level, you're physically there. You can do that. I agree. Go back to the jumper switch, and there's no reason to be able to do it from within the operating system either. That just seems silly. That just seems like you're asking for it.
Well, it was hard for a while there. Floppies had disappeared, and
I understand.
Booting off USB wasn't reliable yet. It made it kind of hard to upgrade the BIOS any other way.
Mm-hmm. No, I get it. And it seems like Apple's machines would be also vulnerable to something like this theoretically, because they also soft update through the operating. Actually,
and also I think Mac's probably using a Word BIOS.
No, they use EFI. They don't even have a BIOS. Right. But they download the image and then they reboot into this open EFI environment and then flash from within there. So it's like a different thing. Should we move on to our last story in the round?
One more story.
Not the rounds. Before the war story, yeah. This one I feel bad for because, whenever you see a fellow podcaster take one on the cheek, you always feel bad. Twit.tv site was hacked yesterday, I think, or last night.
I don't know the exact date, but yeah. So Twit.tv's page was compromised, and basically what they did was they left the page so it looked normal, but they inserted an invisible iframe in the page. And that iframe went to another site where it would try to use Java and PDF exploits to infect your machine.
Yeah, they were actually trying to load crap onto people's computer.
Yeah, that sucks. Again, this is that scenario we were talking about of a trusted site that users are going to, especially when they're being very careful not to go to sites they don't trust and, doing everything right. But then that site gets hacked, and so they go there and they get the virus anyway.
And it could happen to anyone. I mean, it's something we're conscious of, and it's something that, unfortunately, is just kind of a dick thing to do. It's not like it's one thing.
Probably the worst part is probably an automated attack that wasn't even targeted at Twitter.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I as a web host with 400 websites on our regular Apache server, we see people with outdated copies of E107 or WordPress or whatever having their sites hacked and having these iframes injected all the time.
Yeah, it just sucks because I can kind of follow when somebody does it for political reasons, like, some sort of big motivational statement or something. But when it's just somebody who's just putting content on the web, yeah, it's kind of a dick thing to do.
Yeah, and in this case, it's possibly worse that it was automated. They weren't even specifically picking on this page because it's big and popular. It was just...
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing to put like a big penis on somebody's website or cover it with bacon or something like that, but it's another thing when you infect their visitors. That's the part that gets me. So, hey, what do you think about moving on to the war story? You ready?
Just one thing. Google's Safe Browsing, which is built into Firefox and Google Chrome, eventually detected this and started presenting users with a warning when they tried to go to the website.
Yeah, where was IE? IE supposedly has like the safe net filter system, but all I heard about was Firefox and Chrome that were warning people.
Well,
so I don't know if IE was taking a break or...
Google spiders the internet a little faster than most.
That's true. Well, they got to get Bing on it. They got to get that Bing spider going. All right, why don't we talk about your war story? Because this sounds like an interesting one, and it's been a while since we had one.
Yeah, so this isn't directly me. I was affected by this as a customer, but...
I love those ones.
I wasn't actually, involved in fixing the problem.
Okay, all right.
I was just,
so what
complaining
happened?
at them all night, being like, why isn't this fixed yet?
Oh, man. So it's one of those situations where you're stuck on being unable to do anything. You just have to be on the phone. I am presently in one of those right now. While we're shooting this show, I am waiting to hear back from a service technician on an outage.
Yeah, so once it was resolved, I indicated that I wanted a copy, and once they wrote it up, they sent me the ROF, or Reason for Outage.
Yeah.
Or, sorry, RFO.
So now are you going to share the highlights with us?
Yeah. So basically at 4 p.m. local time, which would be Pacific in this case, on September 11th, the Seattle 1 data center experienced an unexpected service interruption.
Oh, really?
So I noticed, my server's going, all of a sudden it dropped offline, and my Nagios monitoring starts pinging me saying, hey, the Seattle server is unreachable, which is different than down. It means that when I set up my Nagios, I have parent-child relationships, and it pings the router in front of our server and then our server. So if the router ever goes down, it knows that the server behind it won't be reachable.
And then so you don't get spammed that the server's down,
Right.
It's like, yeah, the router's down. Of course the server's not reachable.
I got, one notice saying that the server was unreachable rather than 20 notices saying each individual service on that server was down.
Which basically gives you an aneurysm because you just get like all these notifications at once and it just starts building up like, oh my God. So that's nice. So what happened?
So they determined that it was a problem with one of their edge routers. It was malfunctioning. So they rebooted it.
Sure.
And after that, they started working with the TAC, the Technical Assistance Center, which when you're dealing with companies like Cisco, they don't have a help desk. They have a Technical Assistance Center.
A TAC.
Yes.
It's kind of silly.
So, no, it's because they don't have regular help desk type people.
It just sounds...
Yeah.
I don't know. It just sounds a little silly to me.
So to try to figure out what the cause of the issue was and avert it happening again.
Oh, okay.
But at 6:20 p.m., so it's about 2 hours after they got everything back online, it happened again. So they rebooted again. And in order to prevent this from, going on and on every 2 hours forever, they decided the best course of action would be to replace the device with a spare that they have.
Good.
Right? So they keep a spare.
Yeah.
So at approximately 7 p.m. local time, they began the process of replacing the faulty device with the new one, the spare.
Okay.
So they pulled the old device out and put the new one in. But once they powered on the replacement device, it started sending out alerts because of a bunch of errors in the switching fabric modules. So again, they called the TAC, and by about 8:30, they decided with the advice from the TAC that the best option was to pull the switch fabrics out of the new device and put the ones in from the old one.
Wow.
Because the ones from the old one were known to be working, right?
Theoretically.
Yeah. So they did that. They restarted it, and it started producing the same errors, even with the new line cards or switching fabrics.
Oh, okay. So now I'm starting to think it wasn't the router.
Right. Well, no.
No, really.
So then the issue was escalated to tier 2 support. And that's actually a fairly big deal when you're dealing with some, carrier grade equipment here.
Okay.
So then they determined the issue must be somewhere inside the device chassis rather than the switching modules, right? Because if you tried known working switching modules and they didn't work, then it's probably the part the switching module plugs into.
makes
So then
sense.
they decided to take the chassis from the old device and all the components from the new device and see if that would work. Once they did that, they started getting a different set of errors, this time from the management modules communicating with the line cards. So by the time we're at this point, it's now 4:30 in the morning. So it's been 12 hours.
And are
since
you
the
up this whole
original
time, or did you go to bed and to see if they can manage?
No, I went to bed.
Okay, good.
Because in this case, our Seattle server is just an edge node for our cluster. So as soon as it went down, our DNS system took it out of rotation and routed traffic around it. And
very similar to what we were just talking about recently.
yes, and so our users never experienced any of the issue.
So that's really cool. So what was that, like 2 episodes ago where we talked about DNS systems that are capable of
DNS
doing that?
failover? Yep.
Yeah.
It's 2 or 3 episodes ago. So this is about 12 hours after the original event, but they hadn't been down the whole time. They were back up for 2 hours and then back up a little bit, and then they got stuck down when they started tearing the machine apart.
Boy, I hope the data center has a good support contract with Cisco. It's probably costing them some money. You know, those guys are expensive.
Well, we'll get to that part at the end, too.
Oh, okay.
So then the matter was escalated to Tier 3 support.
The big boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And also at this time, they dispatched the ISP dispatched their head network technician from their facility in Phoenix with a different spare device.
Whoa. So he was going to
maybe-
fly from Phoenix to Seattle with a router?
Yeah. So he left at 4:30 in the morning.
Oh, man.
So at approximately 6:30 a.m. In Seattle time, the TAC Tier 3 technician concluded that the issue was somehow electrical within
Really?
the switching fabric modules or the chassis.
So
And
they're
it
still
was
trying to blame the modules even though they tried 2 different sets?
Well, no, they're saying is the power in the chassis is
Oh.
so
Gotcha.
resulting in improper current being sent to the various parts of the device and damaging them. So the new chassis had something wrong with the power supply or something and zapped the modules. Then they pulled them out, put in their known working ones, and zapped those as well.
Oh, no.
Because the electrical subsystem within the device was potentially damaging all the modules they had, we were advised that it would be better to turn both of them off and not use them until the manufacturer could tear them apart and figure out what happened.
I have done something like that before too. We had a switch that we thought we had an issue with the switch, and so we plugged into it. Oh, it didn't work for me. Will you plug into it? No, I'm not getting any link. We're like, well, geez, this should be working. And then so somebody else comes, well, let me plug into it. I'm like, well, I don't actually think I think there's something wrong with the switch, blah, 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 blah. We're talking about it. And then we realized all 3 of us had blown out the network ports in our laptops. There's something, there are electrical problems in that switch. And as each one of us plugged in, we all fried our NICs.
Ouch.
Yeah. Anyways, continue, sir.
Yep. So at approximately 12 p.m., their head network technician arrived at the Seattle airport, and by 1 a.m. he was at the facility with the replacement device, and by 2 p.m. they had installed the new device, and everything came back online.
Oh, good. So they were right. It was the power supply that was damaging the equipment.
Yeah.
So how
luckily
long were
they
you
had
down
that
for?
second spare. So in total, including the 2 mini outages and then the big long one, it was about 19 hours and 8 minutes of outage.
Oh boy. Good thing you could route around there.
Yes, and also good for me, the ISP's service level agreement with me says that for each hour they're down, I get 5% refund.
So you make a little money.
Well, not quite, but 19
money, I
hours
guess.
and 8 minutes works out to 21-hour periods.
Oh, I see.
Times 5% equals a 100% refund for that month.
That's so you save the whole, well, so
Yeah.
is it worth, I guess, 19-hour outage?
In this
Probably
case,
not. But
in this case, because it didn't affect us and we didn't have to pay out the scale engine SLA, which is 15 times the amount of downtime refunded, it was okay because we didn't have to pay out. If it had affected our customers and made us pay out our SLA, it would have sucked.
yeah. Well, no, since you're able to route around it, you're able to pocket the money and you don't have an SLA impact on your side.
Right.
So that's awesome. Well, very, very cool. Now,
Sadly, that wasn't one of the servers that cost a lot.
oh, well, go figure, huh?
Yeah.
Now, you have the point-by-point play in the show notes, too, if people want to check it out to see it, because it's kind of a funny it's chain of events. And, boy, aren't you glad? It's one of those scenarios where you're glad you're just the person picking up the phone and not the person there till 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning working on it or whatever.
Basically working for 20 hours straight to fix this.
Because, you've been in that position, I'm sure, and it's stressful, it's dreadful.
Not
so
fun at all.
All right, man. Well, you know what that means. It's time to move on to the TechSNAP feedback. Yep, and that music means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback segment, and we're going to use this question to kick off the home server discussion that we'll have for the next few episodes. And this is a great one,
It'll probably
Alan.
be more than a few episodes.
Yeah. I hope that's okay with everybody. You know, that's kind of one of the luxuries we have of being like independent media, is I don't think you'd ever have like, if TechSNAP was a TV show, like the old Tech TV days, I don't think they'd be allowed to take one topic and stretch it over multiple episodes. They don't get to go in depth as we get to go. So it's one of the unique things we get to do as new media, is we get to, hey, if we think this home server topic needs to take 4 episodes, it takes 4 episodes, and that's just what we do, or whatever it is,
Right, and, we're trying to not dominate the episode with one topic.
Yeah.
Right, we still have the news and everything. And
yeah, but it's a topic that has a lot of depth.
There's no way we could cover it even in just, if we dedicated 3 whole 1-hour episodes to it, we can still never cover everything we need to cover.
No, and I like this approach. So we're going to kick off the home server discussion with this feedback question regarding routers and stuff, and then we're going to kind of build on top of that and talk about a lot of different components of servers. We're going to kind of start at the beginning, and then we're going to, at the end of the home server segment stretch that we're doing, it's going to be kind of an all-inclusive package of home server stuff. So I think you guys are going to really like it.
But we're going to try to talk about not just like Linux-based things. Like even like when we get to the file server stuff, we're going to talk a bit about how to do it on Windows as well.
Yeah, we're going to try to cover that. And
it's like we're trying to, just cover the general topics rather than specific implementations.
Yeah. So this question that we're going to cover today was submitted on our Reddit page by Crash Benedict, and he says, I have just a few questions about home servers for TechSNAP. He says, I've managed to cobble a PC together out of some old bits I have lying around. I've heard this story a couple of times. He says it's a Pentium 4.
That's my first home server, was myself and my roommate.
Yeah.
Combined our pile of spare parts and then split the cost of like the 2 other parts we needed, and then we had a home server.
Well, and Jeremy was just talking to me about this too. He has some spare parts because he upgraded his PC like earlier this year, whatever. And he says, so maybe he was thinking about FreeNAS, but he was, so he's kind of in the same boat Jeremy is. He says, anyways, he has a Pentium 4. He's got 2 network cards. Oh, I didn't catch that last time. 1.5 gigs of RAM. He says he also has an ASDL router, a DSL router, and also a which has wireless on it. And he also has a hub which has wireless on it. He wants to know if he can take these bits and set it up so the server does things like caching from the internet, maybe a little bit of DNS like we talked last episodes, and then possibly the ability to throttle Wi-Fi users.
Yep.
He's curious, should he do Linux? What should he do here? And I thought, this is a really good question, because one of the keywords he used in his question here was this server. What can I do with this server? And I thought to myself, I don't know if I want to consider a home server the right system for a router. You know what I mean?
Mine is, but it doesn't have to be, and sometimes it's easier if it's not, but for power utilization and so on, and if you only have so much hardware, then you can combine all the roles into one.
What about the idea that if somebody compromised your Edge box, they also then have your home file server or whatever's on there?
Right, but if they compromise your router, then they could jump to the internal server anyway.
Yeah, it's a pretty quick hop and a jump.
Yeah.
And then I thought, well, what about running the router bits in virtualization?
I used to do that.
Better?
When my home server was Windows, I ran VMware server on it, and in an instance, I had a FreeBSD router.
And how did that work?
It worked perfectly fine, mostly. I had a little bit of issues with when the OS would speed up and slow down the processor. It would sometimes screw with the clock in the VM.
Yeah.
And that would screw with the DHCP client, making sure that it renewed my IP address.
I think that stuff's fixed now, like that kind of stuff.
And mostly because it was my home server, I actually hard-coded the power control to always underclock it.
So how did you do the network cards? Did you have like 2 virtual network cards?
What I did is I had 2 virtual network cards. Each one was bridged to one of the to each of the 2 physical cards.
Because he's got a P4 2.8 gigahertz. He's got 1.5 gigs of RAM. A P4 just isn't going to be a good virtualization machine, I don't think.
So it's not going to be good for virtualization.
No.
Although it's not like he's going to need that much performance, so it's not going to be horrible, but it's probably not the best way to do that there. So here, if you want to use it as a home server that does much more than what we're going to talk about today, then you probably want to have a separate box for the firewall and then this one for the file server.
Yeah. And you might consider it best practice too. Like Alan says, though, really, if you get the router, you're only one hop away from the server anyways. Mm-hmm. But it does, anything you can do not to increase your exposure to the web
is good. But
you have to balance that with practicality in the home situation.
Yeah, like you can't have 5 servers set up in your house because you want to isolate each application.
Well, I kind of do. No.
Well, yeah, so do I, but that's beside the point.
Oh, okay, all right.
We're not normal.
Don't be like us. Don't do like we do. No, and I put it in the comments right here on the Reddit page, so I'll tip my hat early, but I recommended he check out pfSense.
Yes, pfSense is epic.
Yeah, and we've talked about it before on the show, but do you want to do a quick highlight?
Basically, it's a FreeBSD-based router appliance. And the best part about it is you can either install it on any machine. The minimum system requirements are 100 megahertz and 128 megabytes of RAM. You don't need anything fancy to do this, right? Your own little Linksys or Netgear box that you have, or D-Link, is not going to be any better than a 100 megahertz old computer you managed to find.
Right. And it also, the other nice
all
thing
you
about
need is any machine with 2 network cards and you're good to go.
The other nice thing about pfSense that the other stuff might not do for you is it actually gives you a really easy-to-use web GUI.
Yes.
And on top of that,
if you're used to the web interface you get from your Linksys or your D-Link or your whatever, you'll recognize pfSense right away, as it looks exactly like that. It just has a lot more options. I'm
showing right now in the video version here. He also mentioned, throttling Wi-Fi users,
yes.
Right? And pfSense has a lot of great charting to show you the bandwidth usage and give you statistics on when bandwidth is being used. And pfSense also has like an apps-like architecture where they're not quite like that, but all from the menu you can say, install proxy caching. Hit that, it downloads Squid in the background and automatically installs it for you and sets it up and then gives you a corresponding web UI to configure it. Exactly. Same with DNS.
Yep. So it's your router and firewall, unless you customize your firewall rules and so on. And it can also do DHCP, right, because that's the standard thing you would want to do. It can run DNS, but also dynamic DNS, so that when a machine's DHCP address changes, it updates the DNS entry automatically.
I love that.
We talked about that a bit last week. It can do 3 different kinds of VPN. It can be a VPN client or a server. So it can connect your whole LAN to a LAN somewhere else, or allow you to connect into it from somewhere else. So if you're at school, for example, you can VPN into your home and be on your home network. Or if you're a company with 2 offices, you can use a pfSense box at each end to create a VPN between them to give you a secure LAN over the internet.
And then, of course, it's a full-fledged, and I really, truly mean, it is a full-fledged corporate-class, enterprise-grade firewall. It uses the firewall from OpenBSD, right, Alan?
Yeah, it uses PF, which is the packet filter. Now, and remember, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the other part of the segment when about redundancy. Is one of the features of pfSense is CARP, where you can set up 2 of them, so if one of them fails, it automatically, your traffic keeps going through the other one.
And if you're baller enough, I suppose you could use that, like if you had 2 different internet connections. You know what? I have a client that has 2 DSL lines, as a matter of fact. And
you can do that with one pfSense box as long as you have enough network cards.
Yeah. And then I guess I would just wrap it and say that I have used I used a firewall that was, it was a very, very expensive $12,000 unit that was put into a bank. And when I saw the technician come out and work it, you know what he was doing? He was using packet filter commands on the command line.
Yep.
So, I mean, we're talking like a $12,000 firewall built for a bank. It used the same underlying technology that pfSense used. Yep. And it's way easier and it's free.
Yeah.
It's one of the best products in the open source world out there right now.
Right. And so this is a lot of stuff most routers can do, but what makes this one different is it has additional features that normally you only get from like enterprise grade stuff. The first one being captive portal. So what this is when somebody connects to your wireless, no matter what site they go to, they get this portal screen that requires them to log in.
Yeah.
You see this a lot at like hotels and stuff.
Maybe you want to have open Wi-Fi for some reason, like for your neighbors or something, but you want to know if somebody's screwing off.
Yeah,
that'd be a great way to track that.
The captive portal can just be a notice saying, hey, if you're going to use my wireless, you had to follow these rules.
You see that like at coffee shops and stuff too. Yep. So like if you wanted to put wireless at a coffee shop and do that kind of thing, you could use a pfSense box to manage that.
And I think there's a module that you can get that will allow you to charge for it as well.
Yes, there are. Yeah.
The other thing that this guy was specifically interested in is traffic shaping. You can use, I think it uses the OpenBSD alt queue system to allow you to limit certain like MAC addresses to certain levels of traffic and so on.
Oh, really?
So you can make sure that, if you have a bunch of roommates and they like to, download stuff all day and lag you while you're trying to play a game, you can throttle their connections.
I did that very specific thing back when I had roommates. I gave the Xbox priority traffic using pfSense.
Exactly. And you can also do the graphing.
Yes.
Another thing is some people have a limited amount of transfer they're allowed to do in a month.
Oh, great
Right?
point.
Like,
yeah.
For example, on my connection, it's 175 gigabytes. So you can use pfSense can track that for you and let you know when you're getting close to going over.
Yeah, it uses, what is it called? RRD graphene.
Yeah.
Right? Beautiful graphene. It's an open source graphene technology that produces great looking charts based on the data that it collects.
The main thing about it is it allows you to keep historic data without taking a lot of space.
Yes.
I could do a whole episode on how RRD graphs work.
And you can use the filters inside the very easy to use pfSense web interface to get historical trends and all kinds of stuff.
But also, if you have a 50 gigabyte limit and you're like, I've used 40 gigabytes already, it's like, what did I use 40 gigabytes on?
And when?
You can break down the traffic and say, oh, look, the other day there, I remember that now.
And you can also
I downloaded all 23 episodes of TechSNAP in HD.
Good man. You can also do things like you can install the NTOP package and do complete protocol analysis, see what all your top talkers are, what destination points you talk to the most, and how much transfer rate between you and them. Tons of fun to geek out on. It's based off of monowall, right? Or at least the management side of it is?
Maybe a little bit. Monowalls, both monowall and pfSense are based on FreeBSD, but pfSense has got quite a bit different now. It replaces the entire startup system with XML files, and almost everything in pfSense is written in PHP.
Yeah. I don't mean to gush so much about it, but it really is like I've installed it for clients as their firewall. I've used it as my own. I've used it a lot.
Like we even did it once. It was like we recommended against it, but the client insisted this is the way they wanted to do it, so we did it. So they had an office with a bunch of machines, and they had a domain controller, but that was also their web server.
Oh, sure.
And they only had a crappy DSL connection, so they co-located their server with us.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
So then, what would happen is when their domain controller / web server booted up, it would VPN into the pfSense box at their office. And that would allow all the client machines in their office to connect to the domain controller to log in.
Wow. So they actually essentially did their domain authentication over the internet. Am I following you?
By a VPN, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. Did it work good?
It worked okay.
Yeah, it worked okay. I mean, Windows can be touchy.
Your domain controller likes to be on the LAN. But it worked well enough.
I mean, that's impressive. And
although
if nothing else, that would
really bad idea to have your domain controller be a web server.
And also, if you do it on a remote link like that, don't have roaming profiles with the profiles stored on the domain controller.
Right, exactly.
Though, you know what that would be probably a useful scenario for is like failover. So that if you had several offices and you had a domain controller crash in one office, you could bring that VPN up and at least people could log in for the day and stuff like that. So that might be a useful way to use that. I guess this is really our way of kicking off the home server segment, saying maybe consider using something more dedicated for your home server. Because like Alan was saying, it doesn't actually have to be on a full PC either. You could. There's a lot of little hardware devices you can flash this on.
Yes, there's like a Firebox, which is, it practically looks like a switch. It's a little router with like 8 network cards in it.
Oh, the Firebox is sweet. You know, what I'm thinking is I have that machine that I use. It's an Atom computer that I use for mining. If I wanted to retire that from Bitcoin mining, and I'll, we'll talk about more of that.
A really cheap Atom box like that is
with no fan.
No fan and really low power utilization.
And pfSense has images you can just flash to a thumb drive if you want to not even have a moving part, which is what I would do.
Or a CF drive for older machines that, there are some similar things to, I think there's a fork of pfSense that can run on like specialty hardware, like ARM chip-based, like single computer on a board or whatever it's called. System on a chip.
And I think there's a few of the Linksys you can flash it on too, and the Buffaloes. So there you go. All right, Alan, anything else in the feedback?
Not really. It's just next week we're going to talk about the different RAID types.
Yeah.
Because there's a bunch people know about, like RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5. But there's a bunch more people don't always know about, and just kind of talking about use cases for each different one. And
which one makes sense for a home server, right? Because you want your home server data to be safe. So that seems like the next logical step in the home server's
But usually the point of having a home server is having more storage.
Yeah.
So losing a bunch of that for redundancy
sucks.
It's kind of a trade-off.
Yeah.
And then also which RAIDs you can use is sometimes limited by your hardware, right? A lot of motherboards come with built-in support for RAID, but they can't do RAID 5 because the math involved is too much for the onboard chip.
And they have very simple controller chips on the boards. Yeah. Yeah, that'll be an interesting segment. I'm looking forward to that one because there's all kinds of crazy RAID out there that I think people probably don't even know about. So
Yeah.
talk about that. All right, Alan.
Most people haven't heard of RAID 60.
RAID 60? Wow. I can't wait to talk about RAID 60. But it's time to move in to the TechSNAP Roundup. Okay, Alan, it's time for the Roundup, and the Roundup is everything that either didn't quite make it into the show, but still was awesome enough that we wanted to talk about, or just a few extra things that we thought we'd include for you to go read more for extra reading in case you want to do a little homework after TechSNAP. Yep. All right, Alan, are you ready to blaze through these suckers?
Yep.
All right, the first story in the Roundup is a mention for a LastPass replacement. Now, I will warn you that it does sound a little addy. Like it looks like maybe somebody's just coming here to pimp their software. But it seems like good software to pimp, so why the hell not? So this thing is called Clippers, and he says, I just want to let you know about an excellent LastPass alternative called Clippers. Clippers beats out LastPass in a few ways. All the data is encrypted client-side. Well, actually, so is LastPass. And it uses SRP auth, so your data cannot be read on the server side. Second, it's open source, and that's the part I like right there. And so it allows, you can also run your own Clippers server. That's the interesting bit.
That is definitely appealing.
Yeah, it is. It is. So, anyways, you can go to clipperswithaz.com, CLIPPERZ.com if you want to check it out. I asked for more info, like, hey, by the way, is it like, do they have browser plugins and stuff like that? And so I'm not sure yet because I just saw this morning, but it looks kind of cool. I'm a big LastPass fan. I've been planning to talk a lot about it. I think I will soon.
Yep. And that's Clippers with a Z.
Yeah, with a Z. All right, Alan, you want to take the next story on the Roundup about Warner Brothers?
Hotfile.com is suing Warner Brothers for abusing the copyright takedown tool.
Yeah, isn't
so
that
basically,
funny?
Hotfiles was trying to be legitimate, and so they have a tool that Warner Brothers could use to request takedown of Warner Brothers content that might have got posted to the site. But Warner Brothers went around and tried to take down basically every file on the site.
Yeah, even like open source.
Trying to pull down open source software that had nothing to do with Warner Brothers in any way.
No, they just got all abusive about it. It's kind of ridiculous.
And, well, the worst part was that the tool would replace the files that were taken down with a link to where you could buy the Warner Brothers content legitimately. And so that, if people end up at Hotfile trying to pirate a copy of a movie, they would get a link to buy it. And that's fine, except for when they're basically using it as a spam tool by removing files that have nothing to do with their movie with a link to their movie.
They're just being jerks, and then they're just, exactly. They're trying to get links to their stuff.
Yeah.
All right. This next one came out this week, and it's kind of interesting. First of all, it's from 2010, but I guess it's just hitting the news in this last week, and it's about a Japanese air traffic controller who was able to post sensitive information about President Obama's flight plans and also drone operations, which isn't actually being talked about as much. But here's the details. I actually think this is kind of an interesting story. It says, reportedly, it included information like the altitudes of Air Force One, the route of Air Force One, pictures of Air Force One's computer screens, which would be, information that you'd think not your average person would want to read. Anyways, this was all made public recently, and I guess we don't know if this was published before or after Obama's visit. Anyways, they're not giving us the name of the air traffic controller, but he's described as in his late 50s, and he's the chief traffic controller who had worked at the airport for 30 consecutive years before he did this. I mean, that's really something. But here's the other thing. The controller on his blog also posted information about U.S. drone flights near the Fukushima power plant. Interesting. It seems kind of like at first glance, it sounds like somebody just doing a one-off thing, but then you start reading into that a little bit, and so maybe it was like a political activist that got his hands on information, and I guess air traffic controllers are just privy to that because they have to be monitoring those things that are in the air.
Yeah, and that's how we get with the drones as well, right? It's like we're going to have drones flying over here, so make sure no airplanes come and run into them. I
guess something like this happened in 2004 as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's not the first time something like this happened.
Yeah.
All right, do you want to take the next story in the roundup?
We'll cover the one you skipped. The White House has cleared the way for net neutrality protections.
Yeah.
New FCC rules about limiting what can be throttled.
Yeah,
and content blocking.
This story is particularly interesting because that sounds like a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That does sound like a good thing. I'll take the pessimistic view of it and just give you my pessimist summary here.
If the government's doing it, they're going to do it half-assed and backwards.
Well, it also sets the stage for court challenges from the wireless carriers. You see, Verizon and Metro PCS have already tried to block this proposal but essentially they were turned away in April by the U.S. Court of Appeals, saying you have to wait until the proposal's final. Right. And so they got it dismissed. But now that the proposal is going to be final, they're now allowed to sue to block it. So it could be that maybe they're just formalizing the process to allow the wireless carriers to block it. But it does say that the regulations would prohibit ISPs from blocking access to any lawful content, and that they would also require transparency for mobile broadband providers on their throttling practices. Which
specifically, you wouldn't want Verizon to be able to block you from using Netflix on your phone because they want you to use Verizon Movie app.
Yeah.
And that's what this is all about. It's when there's doing things that are unreasonable.
Mm-hmm.
We're not talking about throttling content.
And if I'm paying $30+ a month for a data service, let me know what you are limiting my access to.
If you're paying for X gigabytes of service, it should be unfettered.
Yeah, I agree. Now, this next story in the roundup is about Chinese defense propaganda. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah. So basically, it's defensive propaganda where China attempts to make itself appear as the victim in this whole Cyber Dragon scandal about, although they had openly admitted to purposely targeting the U.S. with cyber attacks before, now they're trying to claim they didn't. And that the U.S. is being a bully and is picking on them.
Oh, I gotcha. Well, of course, they're always going to go out there and try to, the U.S. is also engaging in social media.
It's all about public relations.
Yep.
Not the truth.
Right. Now, this next story doesn't come to a surprise to me at all, although it is a big mindset change that I think a lot of server administrators and standard IT shops are going to go through. But this is a story running on Slashdot. It says demand for custom data center servers is rising. And I totally believe this. I mean, you look at like what Google and what Facebook do where they build custom servers.
Was one of the first couple of things we covered on TechSNAP was how the custom servers that Google and Facebook use.
Yeah.
And how, Facebook's got this system where they have DC lines going to the servers and they hard drives get the power directly from the motherboard and boot up in sequence to avoid an inrush current.
And we've seen pictures of Google systems where they don't even bother putting systems in cases. And in fact, I reflected that in my Bitcoin mining system. The new Bitcoin mining rigs that I added,
and Facebook was the same way. It's like an open tray system.
Yeah. And it totally makes sense. Why would you pay a minimum of $4,000 for like an HP DL380? And when you are just going to use it as a virtualization node or something anyways. You know what I mean?
But yeah, like half the hardware that's on there you don't need. So customize without it.
Yeah. So of course this is a trend that I'm not surprised to see at all, although it does probably scare folks like HP and Dell because those enterprise margins are huge. It's a huge profit center for them. You want to take this last one about Google and those comments?
Google has disabled YouTube comments for all users from the Republic of Korea, which is South Korea, after a new law there was passed that requires users to give their real name and their national ID card number when they're posting things online. Now, there's an exception in the law for sites that have less than 100,000 unique visitors per day. Because, if you have a small site, it's going to be hard to implement that kind of thing just for Korean users. But basically, the Korean law is saying that they don't want to allow, anonymity on the internet.
And now Google, has pulled out of China in the past because of humanitarian issues and conflicts they came up against. This one's a little different, though, I guess, because they're not blocking content.
No, they're just saying because the law there requires us to do something insane, we're just going to not let you do that so that we don't have to comply with that law.
Well, it's interesting, though, Alan, to start seeing these different countries come up with these, ways to identify people. We talked about the Dutch government system that the
DigiID.
That got knocked offline as part of the DigiNotar hack. And then, President Obama has drafted an Internet Identification Act that he's trying to push through. And the UK government is working on something similar as well. Australia is as well. And apparently so does... is this South Korea? What is this?
Yeah, South Korea.
Yeah.
North Korea doesn't really have the internet.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I mean, they must have something, right? Maybe wireless signal from the border?
They have... In total, they have 5 usable IP addresses allocated to the entire country.
Are you serious?
Yeah. They usually connect through other countries to hide the fact that it's from North Korea.
So they just nat like crazy? It's like a country of...
Well, not quite, but the regular, peasant citizens don't get the internet.
Oh, man.
If you think the Great Firewall of China was bad.
That means nobody there gets to watch TechSNAP.
No.
That is a crime, Alan. All right, why don't we move on to the Bitcoin Blaster segment? Because we always do a little Bitcoin news at the end of every TechSNAP, and I've decided I've got a couple of Bitcoin stories, but then I thought it'd be fun to round up all the various ways people can track what's going on with Bitcoin, because as we shoot this show, as we have for the last couple of weeks, Bitcoin is definitely struggling. I mean, there's just, right? I mean, you would agree, right, Alan?
The market cap is down to $34 million from like 50.
Yeah, and the Bitcoin is trading for $4.07 right now, US. It's bad.
It's like $4.81, but that might be out of date.
Okay, well, it's in that range. Yeah, it is at one of them. It is 481 at one of them.
Interestingly, the difficulty is staying the same.
It is an interesting.
It just moved a couple days ago, and it basically didn't go anywhere.
I've seen people
at 1755.
Especially like on the Reddit Bitcoin subreddits and stuff. I've seen a lot of people posting hardware for sale. I think a lot of people are getting out of the mining gig. I do. But yeah, the total volume, the total market cap of Bitcoin is $34 million US right now.
And it was 50 million like 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So I thought what I would do is, since probably anybody that's following Bitcoin at this point is kind of concerned about...
Interestingly, the Canadian exchange is at $5.51.
Well, that's not bad. That's at least $1 better than the US one.
And usually it's only a couple cents off.
So I'm going to cover a few apps for both Android and iOS to handle your Bitcoin needs. But before we talk about that, I want to talk about something that's kind of exciting. And if anything's going to give Bitcoin a shot in the arm, it might be this story. If it percolates correctly, could be positive. So probably everybody's familiar with Senator Ron Paul, and of course he's running for president too. But Senator Ron Paul is a long-time gold standard supporter. He believes the U.S. dollar should be backed by gold and not by thin air. And I could see some logic to that, especially as a Bitcoin enthusiast. It's kind of funny to, have people argue, well, what's a Bitcoin worth? Well, what's the U.S. dollar worth? How is that U.S. dollar made? What's its value derived from? Anyways, I have a link to a video in the Bitcoin Blaster segment, but he goes on to talk about how he wants to introduce legislation to essentially open up the currency market so that any currency is accepted. And about 22 minutes into the video, he's going on, he's talking about, it could be gold one day. And he said, and Ron Paul says, and maybe even Bitcoins. Interesting that they showed up on his radar like that and that they're being discussed. I honestly expected a ferocious attack against Bitcoin. So to see something that's actually trying to be put in place to make Bitcoin and other types of currency legal, I think that's pretty exciting.
Yep.
Could be a good shot in the arm for Bitcoin. We'll see.
Could be.
All right, so there's that story. Now, why don't I cover one more thing. Before I talk about all of the mobile ways you can get your Bitcoin needs done, I thought I'd talk about a new Bitcoin client that's been floating around. It's called Multibit, and it's kind of new. It's open source, and it looks legit. I saw a few conversation threads with the author. It's Java-based. Excuse me. It's Java-based, and it gives you sort of a nicer interface to your Bitcoin. And it lets you send Bitcoins pretty easily and generate QR codes. You can do wireless payments, and I don't know, it's just a nice little Bitcoin client that is free to use and open source and well received. So we'll link to that in the show notes. But really what this Bitcoin Blaster segment is going to be about is you mobile users. And up first, I thought I'd mention Bitcoin Wallet, which is designed for Android with the intention of letting you buy things with Bitcoin on the go.
Yep.
And you can generate a QR code on your screen, and somebody can scan it, and then they'll send them the Bitcoins, and they receive the Bitcoins. You can also use this as an actual wallet. So if you want to store your Bitcoins with you on your person instead of on your PC, this might be able to do it. And it's a free app in the Android market. Another one is the Mt. Gox mobile app, and this is actually from the Mt. Gox folks, I believe. It's well rated. It's got 4 stars, 63 reviews, and it does what you'd expect. It lets you trade Bitcoins on the go on your Android device. That's kind of cool, right? And it's got over 5,000 installs with a 4.0 average rating, so looks pretty good. And then one last one here for Android is it sort of lets you just monitor the overall various exchange prices. And so you can monitor how a couple exchanges are doing. And this one's a nice app because you just jump right into it, you get the prices, and you jump right out. Just a quick app to do that. Okay? So there's some Android apps to help you track what's going on with Bitcoin and even spend Bitcoins and make Bitcoins. Here's a couple of iOS apps. First up is BTC Mon. And the thing I like about BTC Mon is it lets you set your own different exchanges right in the main menu. So like, Alan, you could put in here, the...
CA Vertex.
Yep, and so you can check the Canadian exchange rate, and you could. So it's not necessarily biased to all the U.S. prices. You can order.
Hey, look, your video was showing the Canadian one.
Yeah. It shows the Canadian one, yeah. So it's and it looks really slick too, and it can check in on your some of your pool accounts and give you stats on your miners, so you know the mega hashes that they're doing. So you can just check on that. That's honestly how I can tell if one of my rigs is offline, is I look at my overall hash rate, and if my overall hash rate's down, I know one of my systems isn't mining correctly. So to be able to do that from the smartphone is really kind of nice. All right.
For sure.
And then the last app I'll talk about is probably the best looking one. It's not free, and it's called iBitcoin. It's one for iOS, but look at this thing. Look at how nice this thing. It looks like a real professional market app. It's got historical trends. It's got conversion rates. It's got market data on there. I mean, it's just a nice looking app, right? And it's got total mining statistics. It's got several different pools you can pull in from, including Mount Red. It's got profit calculators to tell you based on how you're doing and what the current exchange rate is what your profit rate's going to be. It's got worker statistics to give you historical stats on the hash rate of your different workers. It also has the overall historical on the pool, on how the pool's doing. And you can also put in your own custom stats. You can have your own custom stat dash screen where you can put like your difficulty rate, the hash rate, and the exchange rate all in one screen if you want.
Nice.
And it looks just hot doing it. I mean, it looks like the
Bloomberg. It does look a really
app.
Nice designed app, like the look of it.
And so that's iBitcoin, and it's like $2 or something like that. It's $1.99. Anyways, link to that in the show notes. So there you have it. Now, Alan, I think that's the whole show. I think that's it. I wanted to say again,
a hell of a show.
Thanks again for coming on this last week.
No problem.
It was a good show. If people want to go check out the early Ubuntu 11.10 preview,
Yep.
Alan joined me on that, and he even snuck in a few BSD stories in last, which people I think got a kick out of. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of TechSNAP. Now, TechSNAP is released in download form Friday mornings over at jupiterbroadcasting.com, and over there we have it in audio format, HD, mobile version, so you want to watch it on your Android tablet or your iPad or your iPod. You can download it in just about any flavor you want over at jupiterbroadcasting.com. You can also subscribe to the RSS feed so you can get the show weekly. And then you don't even have to worry about it. It just automatically downloads for you. And if you're looking for a few good things to read, go check our show notes and go check out links.techsnap.tv. That's our subreddit page just for TechSNAP. And that is an awesome place for people to submit their home server questions, get stories on our radar. I mean, tons of the content now comes from there, and we really appreciate the work that people do in there. And also, I want to say thanks to people who are stopping in there and leaving comments on some of the stories, because I've taken some of those into consideration too when going through the roundup. So that was really cool. And
especially for the home server thing, we've been getting quite a bit of feedback, but what do you want to do with your home server?
Right.
Or, what questions do you have? And so that we can work those into our segments.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Well, thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode, and we'll see you right back here next week.